Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars.
SoundCartel.
As much change as COVID has wrought, it can also feel like Groundhog Day. And while staff health is paramount, assessing the health of the business is also key to moving forward. Again. From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. So, where to begin? Well, an audit of your organisational health is a great starting point to identify gaps, pain points and opportunities for growth, says Tom Leary, partner and managing director at Q5 Partners, an international award-winning consulting firm that specialises in organisational change. And Tom has 5 signs to watch out for when assessing the organisational health of your business. But first, what exactly is organisational health?
Ultimately, it's taking a systemic look or a systemic philosophy when assessing the overall performance, development and sustainability of an organisation. So traditionally, and certainly if you think about pre-pandemic, organisations would look at how they set direction, how they think about their organisation design, change management, development of leadership and culture, and so on, very separately. And in reality, as I think we all know, we can intuitively understand that they are highly interconnected and in no way linear. They need to be thought about together as a system to really get the best out of the opportunity. And I think the pandemic really has changed the prominence of culture in particular in the eyes of CEOs.
In what way? Can you expand on that a little bit?
What the pandemic has really shone a light on is that actually culture is a hugely important strategic lever. And if you ignore it or think that it's something that is someone else's problem, it will likely come back to bite you. So, and we're seeing that across the board, with the huge amounts of exhaustion, stress. We talk about the pandemic, but it's easy to forget the fires that kicked off in 2019 and September. Large workforces have been under stress for a good 2.5 years now, and they're pretty exhausted. So the cultural elements, how they relate to the work they do, why they get out of bed, why they should work for your organisation, frankly, is becoming really important for CEOs to think about.
Well, you have 4 signs to look for when you're assessing the organisational health for your own business. And the first is finding teams operating as individuals. Tell us what's happened here.
It sounds really obvious, but in particular, the executive teams and the way they work together ultimately set the tone for the organisation. Those executive teams working together as a cohesive group is critically important. And so if you see that that's not something, or that's the case, then that's something that is going to be having ramifications in the business. And, there's many reasons for it. Right now, people are busy. Often people's default stress position is to reduce communication and just get on with what's in front of you. But I also think there are other systemic reasons for this, and some of it's to do with the way incentive structures are designed and, frankly, self-interest. The way the finance sort of cost allocation methodologies are set up in the business, how do shared costs get allocated? Sometimes they're highly logical and representative, sometimes they're not. And that can drive a certain set of behaviours which can be unhelpful.
Right. Well, the second sign you say is an operating model design that starts with structure. Why is this a problem?
When we think about operating model design, organisations typically reach straight for the structure chart. And what that really means is that you build inherent fragility into the organisation when you design it. So a lot of organisations will look very narrowly at structure when we think about operating model, and they'll also think about the individuals they have around a table and the personalities and the relationships, rather than what the organisation needs, what capability it needs to execute strategy. So if you build it the personality way around and you think very narrowly around structure, then one person leaves, then you create a huge problem. So if you look at the way operating model design happens, Sometimes it's happening 3 or 4 months out from an annual budget cycle. There'll be some form of classical remit to remove 5 to 10%, maybe more, out of the business. And it's a very narrow structural discussion. And to be honest, it's not hard to do that in the short term. But actually, the development of an operating model is an opportunity to think more broadly, to think into process, capability required, technology, but also into some of the softer elements of the way people work together, relationships, decision-making, and then things like goal setting and how you measure performance. This all comes together to actually create your operating model. And the other thing that's often missing is in this exercise is recognizing this is an opportunity to inspire the organization and to explain often quite complex or complicated structures and networks and how they come together to deliver a strategy. And if you think about it as answering a question from one of your friends or family who said, well, how does your organization work? If you just gave them a structure chart, you wouldn't really be able to show them. Actually, if you can describe that pictorially or diagrammatically, it's hugely powerful.
Mazars is an international audit, tax and advisory firm committed to helping clients confidently build and grow their businesses. Experience a new perspective with Mazars. Visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au. Well, your third sign, Tom, is decision-making based on limited insight. Can you give us some examples of what you mean by this?
Lots of information that sits in organizations sits disparately in an unconnected way. And so organizations are rich with information and very low when it comes to actually the insight. And really the insight is generated or comes about as a result of combining different data sets together to give you that insight. If you're looking, for example, at product performance, you actually need to pull a number of things together to be able to determine the performance of that product. And some of that will be financial, some of that will be people related, some of it will be actual sales related. And it's how you bring those elements together that really gives you the answer. So it's amazing that, the number of organizations that we talk to who ultimately don't have a particularly good understanding of the risk that sits within their business. The other thing I would note is that people are really looking for silver bullets when it comes to this sort of thing. We've got lots of technology out there. There's lots of organizations. We've got AI. We've got all these fantastic tools. Surely I should be able to just have something that plugs in. And the reality is that organizations have their own DNA. And one organization is very different to the next. And there is no substitute for taking the time to look at the most critical elements and pulling together that insight in a repeatable fashion.
And finally, your fourth sign is that the well-being of the organisation is seen as an HR responsibility. Where should organisational well-being rightly fall then?
Organisations right now, not exclusively, but certainly in large portions of the working world, are under a high degree of stress. And therefore, well-being programs, culture programs need to be sponsored. They need to be initiated by the CEOs of organizations because it is critically important. And in this day and age, it's not acceptable for it not to sit there. It's the expectation of people within the business. It's the expectation of investors. And increasingly, in the same way that ESG is, there's a huge amount of interest around purpose and the way you look after people. And so, yes, the HR teams and HR directors, some excellent leaders will be part of that discussion, but the sponsorship and leadership of it as a key sign to the business has to sit with the CEO.
Well, Tom, as we wrap up, for business owners who've spotted some or all of these warning signs, what should they do next?
One of the first ones I would say, be honest with the organisation as to where you are and that you're looking to make changes and that you're looking to value their input and opinions as part of that process. It's really easy to feel that you've got to come up with all of the answers as an executive team or a CEO in an isolated space, whereas actually it takes courage to actually go out there and speak to people. It's worth it. People really respect it. They don't expect you to be perfect, but they do value being engaged. Secondly, if you certainly seek external support to assist you, that the leaders of your business and you as a leader in your business are front and center of any change that happens. You cannot outsource the changes that you're looking to make from a leadership perspective. And then I think finally I would say, don't try and do too much at once. You don't have to fix everything right away. You don't have to spin up large programmatic setups that just absorb huge amounts of time, huge amounts of energy alongside business as usual delivery. So think about sequencing things, obviously think about prioritizing as part of that, rather than big programs which just attract lots of attention, energy, and can be quite problematic.
That was Tom Leary, Partner and Managing Director of Q5 Partners. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.